Before we begin, I would like to give my thanks and regards to Akira Toriyama. Legendary manga creator Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, artist on Chrono Trigger, Dragon Quest, as well as other manga works like Dr. Slump and Sandland, passed away on March 1st, 2024. I believe I speak for everybody watching this video when I say thank you, Mr. Toriyama, and may your work continue to inspire generations to come. Thank you. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first and potentially last video of this new series. In today's video we're not talking about a video game, instead we're talking about an anime. Dragon Ball, the series that got me into anime. Yes, we are talking about this series again. I do watch more than one show, shut up. You see guys, what we're effectively doing here today is playing a game of Russian roulette. Either this video goes so badly that I never do another one of these again, or Toei Animation nukes my channel, whichever one comes first. We're going to start things off small today. We're not talking about a whole arc, rather we're just going to be focusing on one particular fight. A very specific fight, spearheaded by my favourite villain in all of fictional media, Frieza. This fight can essentially be split into three acts: the Z Warriors vs Frieza, Goku vs Frieza, and Super Saiyan Goku vs Frieza. In case you've forgotten or you've never seen the show, Goku, Vegeta, Krillin and Gohan have just beaten the Ginyu Force, leaving Goku severely injured and in a healing pod. Gohan and Krillin go behind Vegeta's back to summon the dragon using the Namekian Dragon Balls, which they stole from Frieza. With that, they're able to wish Piccolo back to life somewhere on Namek, since they didn't specify. Vegeta wakes up and tries to have his wish of immortality granted, but just before it's given to him, Grand Elder Guru dies, causing the Dragon Balls to turn to stone. Just before Vegeta attempts to kill Gohan or Krillin, a bigger threat arrives in the form of Frieza. Before we get into the fight proper, I think it's first important that we discuss Frieza as a character. He is my favourite villain in all of fictional media, after all. Most great villains have an air of likability to them, or at least some kind of human quality, a relatability factor. Even if they do some truly despicable things, you can relate and sympathise with their philosophy, despite ultimately not agreeing with the actions that they take. Frieza is not a sympathetic character. He is a galactic tyrant that enslaves planets and then sells them off to the highest bidder. In universe, Frieza is responsible for the destruction of planet Vegeta and the Saiyan race. Initially, Frieza enslaved the Saiyan race in order to grow the Frieza Force, both financially and as a means of striking fear throughout the galaxy. More experienced fighters would be sent to hostile planets to clear out all life and put those planets up for auction. Low threat planets were usually left to newborn Saiyans, as even with their limited strength, they could still decimate the planet with their grey ape form come the full moon. Eventually, this working relationship would soon grow sour. The Saiyans were a proud warrior race, and they weren't too happy being kept under Frieza's thumb. It's also worth mentioning that prior to these events, Saiyans were the ones that were pillaging and conquering other races. They didn't think they could be bested until Frieza came along. Frieza, sensing the growing hostility and might of the Saiyans, decided to destroy the planet before anybody could challenge him. Key of which being the Super Saiyan, a warrior pure of heart and possessing incredible strength, rivaled by no other. Except for quite a lot of people actually. A Super Saiyan had not shown itself for thousands of years. Prince Vegeta was taken in to be Frieza's loyal subordinate, now that the threat of his race had been crushed. Frieza's entrance here is just fantastic, or should I say the lack of entrance. Because we never see him arrive, it gives this scene an extra layer of horror to it. Unlike the previous two antagonists, Vegeta and the two incarnations of Piccolo, who were incredibly no-nonsense and ruthless when it came to dispatching their foes, Frieza revels in tormenting his opponent. Moments before, in a fight with Nail, he limits himself to only using one of his arms, proceeding to rip Nail's arms off so that he can grow them back with regeneration so he can do it all over again. From birth, Frieza was held as a fighting prodigy, born with power that's never been matched. As a result, he sees his opposition as less than insects. At several points in the story, he could have easily dealt with Vegeta if he wanted to, and that goes for the rest of the Z Warriors. Now, most people would look at this and go, that's a gigantic plot hole. But that's just it. The threat that somebody like Vegeta individually holds against Frieza is so insignificant that he might as well not even be there, and that makes him complacent, something that we'll be talking about later. Which begs the ultimate question: if Frieza thinks so little of his enemies not to dispatch them right away, just how long was he standing there? Like, we never see him actually arrive, so just how long was he there for? At any moment, any one of these characters could have just been killed, and we'd be none the wiser. I also like how we get to see both Vegeta and Krillin's reaction just to hype up the eventual reveal of him standing there. So the battle begins with Vegeta seemingly holding his own against Frieza, and at this point you get your hopes up. That is until Vegeta insists that Frieza transforms, after learning about it from his fight with Zarbon. At first we get a little fake out in which he tosses off a layer of armour. This is actually a pretty good fake out because up until this point that's what most characters mainly did in Dragon Ball to power up. Eventually though he does transform into this hulking beast. Multiple transformations per fight would become a staple for Dragon Ball villains going forward, but I don't think they were done any better than in this fight. My problem with the transformations of Cell and especially Majin Buu is just they felt so drawn out. They stick around for so long that by the time you get to actually beating them, they've stopped being threatening and just become kind of boring. Here, the transformations are used mid-battle, and they happen much more frequently. Just when you think a character is doing well against Frieza, or that he might be on the ropes, the goalpost gets inched even further away. There's a constant game of tug of war going on with the power dynamics here. At first you think, oh shit, we might actually be okay, and then transformation. The transformations happen more frequently over a smaller period of time, and that makes them more punchy. We get a greater impact as opposed to the diminishing returns we get in future. The transformations in this instance also never interrupt the flow of the fight, and they go seamlessly one after the other. The threat is ever present and the characters don't have time to reflect on their situation. In many cases they're seen improvising on the fly. It also allows for a multitude of characters to contribute to a battle without their inclusion feeling redundant. For example, when Krillin gets the jump on Frieza and cuts off his tail. Frieza lands in a really nice sweet spot where he's just powerful enough to pose a consistent threat, but at the same time still being vulnerable enough to where it's still anybody's game. Unlike future arcs, which mainly just became the Goku and Vegeta show. Compare that to the Cell arc, for example. Several of the characters face off against Cell at various stages, all with them being defeated. Once their turn is over, it's basically it for them. They don't get another shot. Instead, they are quite literally sent to sit on the sidelines. Every time somebody loses one of these fights, there's always a period of time where the characters are at Kame House or at the lookout, saying stuff like, well, we can't actually defeat him, and coming up with a plan of attack. There's a lot more downtime compared to here. Characters have way too much time to come up with a strategy, and the general sense of dread these bad guys exude just diminishes over time. Furthermore, because these characters are so absurdly strong by the end of the series, you don't have any moments like I mentioned with Krillin. If you're not a Saiyan, you ain't worth shit. More of a problem with the Buu arc than the Cell arc for sure, but I never really enjoyed either quite as much as the Saiyan or Frieza sagas, and I think that's the reason why. The design of each of these transformations is also something that I massively commend about this fight, in particular Frieza's final form and how it contrasts with his previous incarnations. Frieza throughout the battle gradually grows more monstrous and grotesque, until finally landing on the design you see here. This design is ingenious for a few reasons. For one, the design itself at first glance seems inherently less threatening. All of his other designs are misshapen or filled with sharp edges and horns, giving him a very demonic quality. In addition, his final form also shares more similarities with his first form than any of the others. This subconsciously tells you that he's actually gotten weaker, not stronger. What further cements this is his facial features and stature. Frieza's final form, in comparison to his previous ones, is made up of curved and rounded edges. This makes him appear elegant and softer. Everything about Frieza is meant to be deceptive. He is soft-spoken, polite, and carries himself with a high level of sophistication and grandeur. He's at the top of the food chain and he knows it. That pleasant demeanour is nothing more than smug gloating. Ryusei Nakano and Chris Ayres do an amazing job with this character in the sub and dub respectively. He keeps up this persona even in battle, so confident is he that he can never be beat. However, it's when he starts to lose his grip on the fight that that mask slowly peels away, giving us a glimpse into his true nature.
So the little pests choose to intervene from the sidelines. They just won't rest until I've been pushed to the very limits of my patience. You meddling brats! I hope you all enjoy suffering the same fate as this planet!
With the tides of battle constantly switching, it makes it very difficult just to know what Frieza will do next. Despite being more powerful than Frieza, I never got that same sense of dread from Cell or Majin Buu. They're good characters and I enjoy them, Kid Buu especially is another one I want to do a video on. I think it's more to do with the fact that this fight is a lot more personal than those were. Like, yeah, sure, the Earth is in danger and that's important and all, but Frieza is quite literally responsible for kicking off this whole franchise. Had he not done what he did, Goku would be a completely different character. I think weirdly, power levels also help a bit here too, since we're still dealing with numbers that we can comprehend. Frieza's strength alone is not what defines him, but rather his personality. While I can't deny the effectiveness of a sympathetic villain, I think it's disappointing that we don't get to see more villains like Frieza. As upsetting as it may be, there are some fucked up people in this world. Frieza is not some mentally unhinged individual, no, he knows exactly what he's doing. And he's proud of it. Nothing he has been earned. His empire was inherited from his father, and his power was present from birth. He literally hasn't had to do anything to get where he is. Much like the Saiyans who he once oppressed, and in turn were oppressors themselves. So too will they share the same fate. To Frieza, the universe doesn't just revolve around him, he is the universe. As messed up as a character as he is, his constant sarcastic remarks and pure delight for causing carnage makes him a perfect love-to-hate villain. Look, I love me a tragic backstory for my villains, but I dare say a character like Frieza is just way more realistic in the grand scheme of things. Some people just like making life hell for others. It's sad, but true. Writing a villain that's both strong and memorable is paramount for a shonen action series, because when all's said and done and they're no longer the top dog anymore, how are you going to remember them? So far, each of our characters haven't had much luck when pushing back Frieza. Vegeta comes up with a desperate plan. Saiyans are genetically constructed for combat, so naturally every time they sustain significant damage, they gain a power boost, relative to how strong Akira Toriyama needs them to be. Vegeta has Krillin blow a hole in him and uses the healing powers of the Namekian Dende to bring him back to full strength. This is genius because it doesn't contradict any prior information, unlike other convenient power boosts in shonen series. Additionally, we know from Vegeta's fights against Zarbon and Jace that this has a precedent for working really well. There's good reason for the audience to assume that Vegeta will pull through here. This all comes to a head once Dende is murdered by Frieza. I absolutely love the tracking shot of the beam here as it misses all the Z fighters. Since Dende hasn't thrown a punch, you kind of exclude him from your mind as part of this fight. I know TFS already made this joke, but it's a good analogy, so I'm using it anyway. This moment in the fight is essentially what happens when you're 30 minutes into an RPG boss fight and your white mage goes down. You panic, frantically selecting your next move, praying to God that you can get your move in before your opponent does. Right now, the party's one and only lifeline has been cut off, and now at any point they could be moments away from death. Vegeta proudly rises to the occasion, announcing that he's finally become a Super Saiyan. Everything he's ever fought for has all come down to this. Slay his captor and retake his throne as the prince of the once mighty warrior race. Despite being convinced that he's pushed Frieza into a corner, it's clear to everybody else that this boost in power is still not enough. Frieza is just too fast. The prince puts all his energy into one last attack, Frieza deflecting it effortlessly. Vegeta has failed, his pride smashed, he is left with nothing. Now a broken, crying mess. The other fighters watch on as Frieza ruthlessly tortures the Saiyan Prince, unable to do anything. Just when it seems as all hope is lost, Goku emerges from the healing capsule and onto the battlefield. After reconvening with his friends, Goku turns his attention to Frieza. Frieza at first doesn't pay any mind to the low-class Saiyan, until, for the first time, Goku manages to land a hit on Frieza, something that hasn't been achieved since he transformed into his final form. Now, this is a good scene, but I do have some issues with it. I mentioned the small power boosts that the Saiyans get earlier. When first landing on planet Namek, Goku's power level is roughly 90,000, double that with the Kaioken, using the fight against Captain Ginyu for reference. We know that Frieza's power level at this current time, bearing in mind that he's not at full power yet, is roughly 3 million. Given his second and third form is roughly 1 million and 2 million respectively, according to Daizenshuu. Daizenshuu also states that Goku's power level after getting out the healing tank is roughly around 3 million as well. Now, with all that said and done, isn't that just a teeny bit bullshit? Vegeta gets a fucking hole through the chest and he can't touch Frieza. Goku gets knocked about a bit, 3 million. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have no problem that Vegeta is behind Goku. I mean, he was before he fought Captain Ginyu, so that makes sense. But to this extent, really? Not only does this feel widely inconsistent, but it also kind of undermines all the grueling gravity training that Goku had to do just to get to this point. I still love this fight, and I think the positives more than outweigh the negatives, but this is an issue I've had ever since I've watched it. If anybody tries to tell you that power scaling is an issue exclusive to Dragon Ball Super, they're talking out their arse. During the start of the battle, Goku and Frieza seem fairly evenly matched. Goku having one huge advantage, that Frieza cannot sense another lifeform's ki. Now obviously, the logical answer to this is that, well, Frieza never learned how to sense energy. On the other hand, it also adds back into the fact of how little he sees his opponent. That even now, he's unaware of Goku's true potential. This leads to a really cool moment where Goku gets the idea to use Kamehameha energy blasts as underwater torpedoes to distract Frieza and ultimately get the jump on him. I love it when Dragon Ball fights incorporate a mix of both technique and spectacle, as it just makes the fight more interesting outside of just punching really hard. As the fight goes on, however, it becomes very clear that Goku is starting to wear out, whereas Frieza has barely even been pushing 50% of what he's capable of. This is the moment where Goku's friends remind us of the Kaioken, a skill that multiplies his power at the cost of stamina. Except, no. In a shocking twist, we find out from King Kai that Goku has already been using the Kaioken, albeit extremely briefly. He's been switching it on and off throughout the fight, so fast in fact that we couldn't even see it. The tool that's been the key to winning Goku's most recent battles is now gone, swept from underneath us. They even have a friendship speech with the Kaioken times 20. There's also a scene where Vegeta appears to Goku and he's naked for some reason. I mean, he gives him a pep talk and tells him to get his shit together. Look, I'm sure this is a very touching scene and everything, and I'm sure there's plenty of symbolism in it, but why the fuck is he naked? Exhausted and out of options, Goku turns to using the Spirit Bomb as a last-ditch attempt. With the combined help of Krillin, Gohan and Piccolo, they're able to distract Frieza long enough for Goku to fire off the Spirit Bomb. After a long, grueling battle, the gang finally rest easy, as Frieza is finally, oh god damn it. Having come so close to death, Frieza decides to stop toying around and actually begins executing Goku and his friends, starting with Krillin. Unfortunately for him, that turns out to be a massive mistake. It's important to note that prior to this point, Goku has been very cold towards his Saiyan heritage, flatly refusing to acknowledge his Saiyan name to both Raditz and Vegeta, and distancing himself wherever possible. Even prior to the fight with Frieza, Goku is still reluctant to take Vegeta's advice, stating that he's always hated him even if he respected him as a warrior. To Goku, the Saiyans are nothing but murderers.
You can beat him as if you harden your heart, you fool! You have to put aside your mercy! Then you might actually stand a chance. You could truly become a Super Saiyan!
I don't care what you say, I could never act as cold-blooded as you do, not even if I thought it'd make me stronger.
Krillin's death, however, ignites something fierce in Goku. For the first time, Goku is ready to embrace his Saiyan blood by heeding Vegeta's words and giving into that pure primal anger and lust for battle. Then, and only then, does he achieve the unreachable. He finally becomes the legendary Super Saiyan. Now this is a moment I'm sure most people have seen even if they haven't watched Dragon Ball. The Super Saiyan is a huge juxtaposition from what we're used to with Goku. Even in the most dire and bleak of circumstances, Goku has always remained a relatively upbeat and cheerful character despite it all. Despite the design change being fairly uninspired, this form has remained a symbol for DBZ fans everywhere, and something that's been ingrained in pop culture. All I'd need to do is show you this face and you'd know that Goku is out for blood. The length of this fight is always something that's brought up as a criticism, even taking into account Kai and the manga and not just the original anime. However, I will always defend it because of this one scene. After watching each of the Z fighters try and fail to topple Frieza, doing everything they can to survive, this one moment is so cathartic. The shoe is on the other foot now. Vegeta was right. The Super Saiyan lives. And now it's the beginning of the end. Goku effortlessly crushes Frieza's hand with the Tyrant unable to do anything. Taking to the skies after dodging several key attacks, Goku urges Frieza to hit him dead on, with the resulting attack that would have once proved fatal completely leaving him unfazed. Sensing that his time grows short, Frieza launches an attack not at Goku, but at the planet itself, resulting in the planet's destruction. In 5 minutes. Even if the planet were to be destroyed, unlike Goku, Frieza can breathe in space, reducing the once mighty Emperor into a snivelling coward. Goku, on the other hand, confident in his abilities, declares that he will beat Frieza in this time, and not only that, lets him power up to max. Meanwhile, King Kai comes up with a plan to use the Earth's Dragon Balls to revive Grand Elder Guru and use the remaining wish on the Namekian Dragon Balls to bring everybody else killed by Frieza back to life and send them to Earth. Goku insists to stay on the planet, both out of a need to avenge Krillin and to beat Frieza at his absolute best. The fight continues until Goku decides that he's had enough. Being at full power is putting too much strain on Frieza's body and he's only getting weaker as the fight continues. Seeing no point in continuing further, Goku spares Frieza and threatens him not to come near him ever again. Before he has a chance to leave the planet, however, Frieza isn't having any of that and launches an attack inspired by Krillin's Destructo Disc, which only enrages Goku even further. Whilst being chased by the Death Slicers, Goku notices that one of them is on course to come into contact with Frieza. Goku tries to warn Frieza, but his warnings ultimately fall on deaf ears. Frieza is sliced in half by his own attack, being rendered unable to fight. Frieza pleads with Goku to lend him some energy. With his pride and his empire in tatters, Goku, against his better judgment, gives it to him and tells Frieza that if he ever shows his face again, then he'll be there to deal with him. Much like Vegeta and Piccolo before him, Frieza is at a crossroads. The aforementioned characters started out as some of Goku's greatest enemies. However, they were afforded the opportunity to grow, to improve. Not only were they able to better themselves in the end, but they also became some of Goku's greatest allies. Maybe in one universe, the same could be said for Frieza. Frieza getting cut in half by his own attack, to me anyway, is kind of symbolic for his downfall as a whole. At the end of the day, it wasn't the Super Saiyan that brought an end to him, it was his own arrogance and his inability to concede defeat when he's quite clearly bested. I love this ending and really the whole dynamic of this fight, as it calls back to what Master Roshi said to Goku and Krillin at the end of the first tournament arc, that the title of strongest is destructive, as it forces talented fighters to become complacent and arrogant, and that there will always be somebody better than you, and that self-improvement is more worth it than just some title. Frieza, an intergalactic dictator who started out with everything, money, power, status, all handed to him at birth, responsible for the deaths of millions, was beaten by a lowly country bumpkin who started out with nothing, looked down on by his own people. only to achieve heights greater than ever thought possible. If that isn't poetic justice, then I don't know what is. This has been Jack. Thank you for watching. Take care.